Woke up this morning with light in my eyes and then realized it was still dark out.
Hey everybody, this is Dan and this is week 5 of class. And last week we talked about Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson and intellectual property law and also the beginnings of the U.S. economy as far as central banking is concerned, infrastructure, that sort of thing. And this week we're going to move forward into the early 1800s and talk about the agricultural revolution and also something called the American system of manufacture. Before we do that, a couple of things I want to draw your attention to. On the discussion board post last week, I noticed there were a few that were sloppy from the standpoint of grammar, capitalization, punctuation, that sort of thing. And I really count off for that stuff because I think that, at this point, this is a college level course, and I know it's not English or composition, but an important part of this course is learning how to express yourself and think critically. And part of that is using the language properly. So watch your capitalization and your grammar, your word usage. I do count off for all that stuff. Now, along those same lines, you'll see a rubric posted on the discussion board pages, and if you read over that rubric, it'll tell you exactly how I score things. So after you write your post, just go ahead and look at the rubric and say, okay, is my grammar correct? Did I expand on the idea? Did I write more than 3 or 4 sentences? And you can assure that you'll get a 100 on your discussion post if it does everything that the rubric asks you to do. And I use a very simple rubric. It's not complicated, so it's easy enough to understand. So I encourage you to look at the rubric and look at your discussion board post and make sure that you're meeting the quality standards that I'm looking for. Now, along those same lines, you'll notice on the home page this week that I've reposted the course objectives. They're in the syllabus, but I decided to rewrite them and put them on the home page because I think that people forget, what we're doing here. So, besides the idea of learning some history, the real purpose behind this class is to help you think critically, to help you express yourself in writing. And so using the language properly, posting arguments properly, posting something balanced, it's all important. And these are skills that you're going to use out in the workplace, to help you advance and to help you find employment. You have to be able to write properly, whether it's a post on LinkedIn or an email or a job application. And once you do get a job, if you're writing reports, that sort of thing, you need to make sure you can structure your argument properly. Now, the other important skill that you should get out of this class is this idea of balance. I know there's a lot of polarization out there right now in the political world, but you need to be able to understand all points of view. That's one of the important parts of history. So, there were some pretty strong opinions expressed about Citizen United, but everybody seemed to be pretty balanced about that. So that's an example of critical thinking where you're not letting your opinion overwhelm your logic. You're understanding both sides of the story. So that's another course objective. But look those over because those course objectives are what I derive the weekly or module objectives from. And the module objectives are really the individual pieces that add up that help us accomplish what we want to in the course. So that's the way it all works. It's just all kind of part of education theory in making sure that you get some value out of the class and you get your money's worth out of the class and hopefully learn a few things that are interesting along the way. So that's that part. As far as the content for this week is concerned, as I said, we're moving into the early 1800s. Now, one of the words you need to know this week is antebellum. It refers to a time frame in the U.S., and most of you probably already know what it means, but it comes from Latin, so ante is before and bellum means war. So the antebellum era refers to an era before the war. If you know that we're in the early 1800s, then you probably have already surmised that we're talking about the Civil War. So antebellum era refers to the era before the Civil War in the U.S., but after the Revolutionary War. So that's kind of the way that historians refer to the era, and that's the era we're talking about right now. Now, there's 2 things we're going to do this week, 2 readings, And one of them is about the American system of manufacture. Succinctly put, that just means manufacturing with interchangeable parts. And it's called the American system of manufacture because it really took hold in this country, beginning with rifles at the Springfield Armory and other armaments like pistols, and then finally sewing machines and clocks. This idea that, you know, you make one part, everybody makes one part, and then it's assembled. And it not only does it help manufacture because parts are interchangeable, but also it eliminates this idea of one person building the whole thing. It makes things the same, so it's easy to repair something with interchangeable parts because, you know, if a gear breaks, you just grab a gear that's just like it and put it on the machine and it'll work. So I want you to read about that. That's important. And when we move forward to the late 1800s, early 1900s, and we start reading about Frederick Taylor and Henry Ford, the people that really designed efficient manufacturing or assembly line manufacturing, without this perfecting of interchangeable parts, none of that could have taken place. And it all adds up to the way business works, the way the economy grows, and the way really the production miracle happens in the U.S. Beginning in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So that's why we're doing that. Read that article. It's a good read. It's very interesting, especially if you're interested in process and efficiency. It's important. The other thing we're going to read about this week is agriculture and innovation. And, you know, back in the 1800s, the technology of the day really involved farm equipment or agricultural equipment. So you will read about Cyrus McCormick and the mechanical reaper. You'll read about John Deere and the steel plow. These are all necessities in order to make agriculture or to help agriculture grow in this country. Now, certainly one of the reasons that the U.S. to this day is, you know, the super producer of agricultural goods is because of our land mass and our climate. So, you know, in North America, where the United States is at, the climate is good for growing a lot of food crops, and certainly there's plenty of land. And in the early 1800s, that the farming is rapidly expanding to the west. You know, even into Ohio and Indiana and the Midwest at that time. So this notion of a steel plow that was very durable and a mechanical reaper is really important because it begins something that I'm going to call the agricultural revolution. And when you think about it, you can't have an urban population and you can't have an industrial revolution without an agricultural revolution first. You have to be able to feed people. So this notion of mechanization is important, and it's something you should remember because it's really the first groundbreaking technology of the era. So, you know, stacking it up in the world of technology, you could argue that the reaper and the plow, you know, are much more important than the cell phone ever was. These are fundamental things that you need to produce food. Once again, without the land, it wouldn't have mattered that much. But the combination of this expanding land and more efficient technology and mechanization of farming makes a big difference. So that's it for this week. I would just ask you again to be careful when you post. Read your post back to yourself aloud. Make sure it makes sense. Make sure that the language is used properly. You don't need to have a super long post. You just need to have something that's reasonable, that gets your point across, and make sure you pay attention to the details like capitalization and punctuation and grammar. If you need any help or have any questions, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'd be happy to help you out. Thanks a lot. I hope you have a good week. Bye-bye.